A very warm welcome to the new episode of Incan Insights. This is your host, Sumit Sarma Samir. This is a Nepal based podcast, but also invite global thought leaders from across the world. Friends in India, if you'd like to listen to the thought leaders and authors from various other countries, please subscribe to my channel. I'm very happy to welcome Gargi Rawat in my channel today. Gargi is a senior news anchor with the NDTV for the last 2 decades. She was educated at the Welham Girls' School in Dehradun and St. Stephen's College of Delhi University. For many years, she has been a regular face on the NDTV channel and has filmed several documentaries and environment related programs. She worked on the first ever news show on wildlife in India, Born Wild, and anchored its Hindi version as well, which was titled Safari India for the Hindi channel NDTV India. Gargi has also been editorial head for some of the best known environmental campaigns carried out by NDTV, including the Greenathon, Save Our Tigers, Protecting India's Coastline, and the Banega Swachh India campaign. She received widespread acclaim for her award winning documentary series on the state of the river Ganga. And Tiger Season is her first work of fiction that's been published by Penguin India. I have a copy of the book signed by the author herself. I'm super happy. Thank you, Gargi, for that. I'm delighted to welcome Gargi in my show. Gargi, welcome and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Sumit, for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
And congratulations on your debut fiction.
Thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, I have not to be honest, finished the whole book, but I have really gone through a lot of pages, and I feel this is an important book. It places tiger conservation at the center. But for my audience, could you please elaborate on this book? What is this all about?
Sure. So, Tiger Season is a work of fiction. It's through the eyes of an environment reporter who's very passionate about wildlife and environment issues. And while she's a reporter for a news channel and has to do a lot of other sort of reporting, her real passion is to do wildlife reporting. And then she gets a great opportunity in the form of a campaign, a Save Our Tigers campaign, in which there's this Bollywood star who's connected to it, and he wants to be filmed in the tiger park in one of the known sanctuaries. And then it's all about the adventure that they have while filming. There's a lot of adventure, controversies, etc. There's man animal conflict, and so it's really it's a fun book. It's an adventure. There's some romance as well, but it has themes of conservation, and it's really I hope that those who love environment and tigers and wildlife and going to parks will enjoy reading it, as will perhaps others who may just read it for the story and for the lightheartedness of it, but at the same time hopefully they'll also learn something.
Right. So the protagonist of your novel, Gargi, her name is Sunaina Joshi, who is also a journalist and employed with the leading media house. I hope that's not you. Are there any parallels between your protagonist journey and your own?
Yes, I get asked that all the time. So some of the experiences are mine. So obviously there's a lot one has seen in the course of reporting and traveling in the country and speaking to so many different people that I thought it would be interesting to share that. So yes, while the story is fiction, a lot of the experiences, a lot of the observations, etc., do come from my own experiences, and some of the incidents that happen in the book have also been incidents that I have reported on or experienced in the course of traveling to various parts of the country and doing shows. I was a part of one of the first wildlife shows done in the country, a news show called Born Wild. I was a producer, and I worked on that. I was also doing the Hindi show called Safari India, which took me to all parts of the country and helping meet various people. So it's all different experiences one has had speaking to people who work in the field of conservation, be it forest department or local people, or the drivers, the guides, and those who run hotels and resorts near parks. So it's all a different sort of what one has experienced during that time, and what people have shared, etc. So all that has been kind of shared in a fun way in this book as well.
Right. And what challenges did you face when you blend factual environmental themes with the fictional storytelling?
Well, challenges. I just say that I was very keen. If when you see in the book, there's this man-animal conflict that happens, that we're seeing more and more of in the country around various forests and reserves and sanctuaries, and it's always a challenge to for the locals, for the forest department, on how to handle it, because as you can understand, there's a lot of tension that goes with it. There are concerns about the animal, about the sanctuary and protecting the animals there, but also one has to look out for the interests of the local people, the villagers who live around these jungles, and they shouldn't feel at any point that their interests are not important, or they're not being that there's not enough concern regarding them, rather than vis-a-vis the animals. So all that is something to balance. So I've tried to put that out in my book, because in the course of reporting on certain incidents of man animal conflict, I find that a lot of sympathy goes for the animal somehow, and not so much for the people who are the poorer villagers who live there, who often get attacked, who get killed. And so I wanted people to understand that that is also very important. They're also part of the whole conservation story, and they must also be thought of. Their welfare must also be thought of. So one can't only think of the animals, and while the animals are of course also very important, but you have to balance it, and of course the forest department as well. So it's very important to be sensitive when dealing with these issues, and not make the locals hostile to conservation, so much so that they may even harm the animals. Next time a tiger or a leopard poaches or comes and kills one of their livestock, if the forest department doesn't treat it sensitively, they could even poison it, which we've seen happen. I mean, I'm sure Nepal and in India as well, in some instances we've had villagers who actually poison the dead animal, because they're so angry over this predator coming and killing their livestock, because it means a lot for them. One goat, one cow, it's a huge cost for them. So so one has to have that trust, and the locals also must feel that if something like this happens, there is an NGO, there's a forest department who will step in and take care of their interests as well. So yes, it's been challenging to put all these themes into the book and make it at the same time very interesting without being too preachy. So I hope well, the feedback that I've got has said that a lot of people enjoyed it, and didn't find it too preachy, and there were some heavy issues being discussed, but in a light, in a fun way, and just trying to put across these concerns.
Right, right. And how has been the response been after the publication of this work? I mean, did you feel that the novel has been able to raise awareness about environmental issues?
Well, I've had a great response. I have to say, so many people have spoken to me and told me how they enjoyed the book. They felt they learned something, and what I said about not being too heavy, too preachy. So, and people have also enjoyed, the aspect of television reporting, because there's so many concerns that go through our minds when we're on the field, about getting the right shots, about getting the right reactions, getting the interviews, also being sensitive. So anybody who's interested in television coverage. So a little bit of that aspect is also there. How one reports, how you're a team. You've got a camera person. The reporter is the one you see, but there's this whole team behind the producer, and concerns about editing, concerns about managing the situation on the ground, concerns about getting the right footage, and so all that also I've tried to put into it, as well as how the local reporters. We go from Delhi to various parts of the country to report, and often we have a stringer or a local reporter who'd help us out, and they deal with very different things, and their concerns are very different, but it's interesting always to have that interaction. So yes, people have enjoyed that aspect of it as well, the fact that they understood how a news channel works, or how challenging filming can be, a little behind the scenes there.
Yeah, yeah. So nature must be an important character in the novel itself. So what role does nature play as a character in your novel, Gargi?
Well, I talk about how we're very lucky and fortunate that we have so much natural wealth in the country, and it's thanks to steps taken, earlier on by like Prime Minister Indira Gandhi at the time when Project Tiger was launched, and to decide to protect these forest areas. Also, we must appreciate and acknowledge the sacrifice of a lot of villagers and tribals who at that time were moved out of these areas so they could remain sacrosanct, so they could remain undisturbed. And I know there's a lot of awareness about that now, and sometimes people talk about that, as opposed, say, to saying on one side we're talking about tiger conservation, but we forget about the tribals. So all this has changed over the years, and we have much better government packages for people in jungles who may want to move out. You get a certain amount, 15 lakh per adult, and so that all that wasn't there earlier on. So I've talked about that in the book as well, that while we appreciate nature, we must also appreciate these sacrifices that have been made by so many unknown, unnamed, and unappreciated tribals and tribals and villagers who've lost what they had in the forest and moved out. So yes, nature is a big part of the book, and also now with more and more talk of climate change and the kind of challenges that brings in terms of changing weather patterns and excessive rain and storms, etc., one realizes more and more that the forests, and that's one of our biggest protections against climate change and against extreme weather occurrences. And thanks to protecting the tiger, we've managed to protect so much of our forests. So, and that must continue. So that is also like a message in the book that one needs to. It's not just tigers, but tiger is just a symbol, or a representation of the forest and all the other animals that get protection there.
True, true. So, were there any surprises or unexpected discoveries you made while writing the book itself?
Well, a lot, as I said, a lot of it was from my own experiences, and the certain messaging that I wanted to get across. So no real surprises, I suppose. It's been interesting to get into the world of publishing, and that has been very different, considering for 2 decades I've been in TV news. What was a bit challenging is in television. Because very often we have these very short 2.5 minute reports. We often have a lot we need to pack into that much time, and when we write for television, we tend to keep it smaller, like shorter and more concise. Whereas when I started writing a novel, one had to expand and write a lot more. So that was a bit of a challenge, because one has been trained to write for television for 2 decades, and now suddenly to write a novel and be a lot more expansive in my use of words. Fortunately, in NDTV, we've always written to pictures. So when we describe something, when we have a report, we often include descriptive sort of sentences. So that perhaps helped, because one would just think about certain scenes and just write describing them, describe what one was imagining that scene to be like.
Yeah. So on that note, I was wondering to ask, which part of Gargi Rawat would you love most? Gargi as a journalist or Gargi as an author?
Well, the author journey is very new to me. I'm enjoying it, and I get to. Thankfully, I've been invited to so many book events and literature festivals, and that's where I met you as well in Bhubaneswar. So that's been very interesting to get to meet different people and understand. So it's a different journey. One has done journalism, for some time now, and this is just another sort of interesting, new sort of space to get into. So that's been very nice to see.
And how do you think the fiction can really complement the journalism, traditional journalism, in raising about environmental issues? Because I asked this because you had been into journalism and now you have been a fiction writer. Which medium do you think is more important?
So obviously, news is very important for us to highlight these issues. Unfortunately, I feel in the last couple of years in India, at least, not enough is being talked about on this front. While of course we all talk about the international negotiations when it comes to climate change, in terms of actually, reporting on wildlife, going to parks and doing all that, it's really it's lessened. And I've been lucky at NDTV. I got to do a lot of that. We got to do. We had these campaigns, Save Our Tiger campaigns, and we were and that's where we had a little involvement of Bollywood as well. Mr. Amitabh Bachchan was our campaign ambassador. So while one has been able to do that, it's really lessened in the last couple of years. The news has gotten a lot more sensational, political. We're constantly having elections after election, so there's not enough space, I feel, for these issues. And so, in that sense, through this novel and through like a fun, fictionalized story, I'm hoping that people will also get the similar message out there.
So how do you calibrate sort of, when you compare the kind of news, as rightly you have pointed out right now, that there's a lot of news from other sectors compared to that of environmental. Is that trend changing right now in the television itself?
Yes, I mean, so as I said, things are a lot more competitive. Even in my book, perhaps the type of journalism I'm describing is, of a era gone by. In a sense, it was perhaps in my early years that one got to report so expansively on issues around, wildlife and conservation. Now the news is a lot more, as I said, political. There are debates. There's election after election. There are various parties. Right now, of course, in India, we're in election mode. But so one would hope that, because these are really the issues that matter. Though over the last couple of years, I think air pollution is something that has gotten a lot of attention, thankfully, because 10 to 12 years ago, when I used to report on air pollution in Delhi, I would find it challenging within my office to get space in the bulletin. I'd be like, this is a very important story. And at that time, the editors were like, okay, but then, suddenly something changed. I think it was also thanks to perhaps a lot more awareness. And there was a talk about Beijing's pollution, Delhi's pollution. You had the embassies, in fact, reacting to it and giving out advisories, and that got attention. Then suddenly it just, all the media came together and started reporting it as a big issue. And I would have never thought that Delhi's air pollution would have become top story the way it did when I used to report on it in the early days. So that has been interesting to see. And definitely, I think every time there is some kind of a extreme weather event, then again everybody gets environmentalists and talks to them about what this means and climate change, etc., etc. But then again, we have to keep the focus on our forest wealth and protecting our forests and jungles. And very often, you see things that are happening that come in the newspapers, that certain rules are being changed or certain projects are being allowed that will lead to forests being you know reduced in some parts. And somehow we're unable to report those stories as we should. So that is something that has.
And how has been your writing process? How long did it really take for you to complete this work?
Well, it took me, I'd say a year and a half. But then, you send it to the publisher, and then there's feedback. Then one goes through, you know, more and more edits, and the process continues. So that's been interesting. And there were some, very important points. I think my editors did. Tell me that this should change, that should change, because one assumes so much when one is writing, that I feel the message is getting across, but the editor would not. She's like, is this correct, or does this really happen? And then I'd realize that I need to give more details, etc. So that back and forth takes a bit of time as well. So.
And did you face any writer's blocks or moments of inspiration while writing this book?
Well, sometimes you do wonder, at some point of the story, how to take this forward, or how to make it fit or seem natural, logical, the sort of the way the story is flowing. So that was there. And sometimes then I just leave it, and I move forward and come back to it. So sometimes that's something I think one has to do when you're in a particular part of your story and you're just not getting anywhere. Then you just have to sometimes move forward and come back and figure out how to do that transition better. And so yes, I mean, it's been interesting.
And Gargi, how do you personally stay motivated and hopeful, at the time, particularly during these contexts, in the face of daunting environmental challenges that we live in?
Well, I guess all we have is to stay hopeful. But like I said, I really do see the glass half full, and the fact that India being a developing nation, and the kind of poverty we continue to have and have had, and still we manage to protect so much of our forests. We are a country that has 70% of the world's wild tigers here. I mean, this is India is the place to see tigers, and that's world renowned. And the fact that it's such a charismatic animal, and it's much loved across the world. People who are so far removed from a tiger forest still love the tiger, and there's so many stories around tigers, etc. Children's books around tigers. So given all that, and the fact that in India, our tiger numbers are still going up, and there are certain challenges, but that is a very positive thing. I'd say so. That's helps one remain positive, and I think the fact that we have 70% of the world's wild tigers is very commendable.
Right, and you must have had certain kind of experience after coming up with this book. Would you like to give any advice to the aspiring writers who are passionate about both fiction and environmental activism?
Well, just to remain hopeful and keep at it. And yes, and if we can have this messaging coming across in our news, in our fiction, and in non-fiction books, it's very important to continue talking about this, especially in the our Asian context, in Indian, Nepalese context. Just to highlight these issues and create more awareness about it.
Right, right. Nepal, in fact, has also been doing a commendable job in terms of preserving tigers. So perhaps a lot of similar stories can be drawn from both sides, and hopefully something could be worked out together that could sort of come out as a story that could relate to both the countries. Are you planning any other project right now? Any second fiction?
Well, my publishers are telling me, and I think this journey of Sunaina Joshi and her friend Jaya, and I feel people would like to see more of that, and perhaps I'm thinking of another novel with the same characters in a different sort of part of the country. So that's something I'm currently working on. Let's see.
Right. And Gargi, out of the interest, do you intend to stay focused only on the environmental issues, or do you want to expand and also talk about some of the other issues that's really gripping the Indian society these days? You want to write on other issues as well?
Yes, perhaps something on the media also at some point, but let's see. Because one has seen, such change in the Indian media over the last, in the course of my 2 decades. The point where I joined as a much very junior person, and the way the news was at that time, a much slower time, as I said, and we'd really discuss our stories and what we want to focus on and what the channel wanted to do, etc. To now, and it's such a you have so many news channels. You have online. In fact, TV news is on the decline, I'd say. There's a lot of online news. There's a lot of fake news. So there's so much that has changed in the course of these last 2 decades, that perhaps that could also lead to a book.
Yeah, and I mean, it has added a lot of challenge and complexity to the lives of journalists itself, because given the mushrooming of all these new channels around, um, I mean, how do you think that journalists should cope up with these new challenges?
Well, journalists are, managing, and many of my colleagues, have left, and they have private platforms, YouTube channels, etc. So it's all changing. A lot of, if you want to write something, you can blog about it. You have all these sort of online platforms to put your news stories there. So yes, I mean it is fairly challenging, and a lot of talk about which way, what is driving the news, and accusations as well, which one didn't have to deal with earlier on. Now a lot of journalists find themselves being questioned as well, and that's the nature of social media, I think. Where you're out there, and anything you put out there gets questioned or talked about. So that has been something of a learning experience, and very challenging for many true journalists.
Right, right. Gargi, I mean, it's fascinating to talk with you. And I mean, I really appreciate the time that you gave to my channel. And I wish you all the best for the new books as well. And I hope that you come up with the other books also. And really, thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you so much, Sumit, for having me. This has been fun.
Thank you.